A new clip showing a University of Minnesota College of Liberal Arts professor saying that the U.S. is an occupier and needs to be decolonized during a pro-Palestinian teach-in is making the rounds on conservative Twitter. Conservatives allege that the clip reveals what leftists really mean when they push for decolonization and land acknowledgement efforts. Let's watch.
Hearing people on social media saying like, oh, land back, like genocide. Does this mean genocide? No. But land back is going to happen. That's going to happen, the indigenous perspective in Turtle Island and how we understand what is also happening in Palestine. And what we really want you to take away tonight is, as Anthony said, we're in the belly of the beast, right? We're all indigenous people who come from nations that are under occupation by the United States government. And of course, the U.S. bankrolls the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. They're one and the same, really. And so it's our responsibility as people who are within the United States to go as hard as possible to decolonize this place, because that will reverberate all across the world, because the U.S. is the greatest predator empire that has ever existed, right? And so we want U.S. out of everywhere. We want U.S. out of Palestine. We want U.S. out of Turtle Island, right? And that the goal is to dismantle the settler project that is the United States for the freedom and the future of all life on this planet. It very much depends upon that.
Another panelist expressed how the terrorist attacks on October 7th made him feel uplifted, but he was shocked how his friends and family denounced the violence.
And I didn't understand, especially people that I thought were, that had like a political understanding of like, I don't know, like decolonization or like what's happening in Palestine. Like I thought like this would be like an uplifting moment. It's like, wow, like this is actual, Justine said this, like Palestine's doing like a land back. Like they're actually doing like what we think that we want to do, but we haven't gotten there yet. But Palestine's just doing it right now. And for me, that was just like, that was beautiful to see. That's like, wow, like I want to be that cool. Resistance to be so strong. I want our fire as people to be so strong that we just take back what is ours.
So when I accuse some on the leftist activists of endorsing the violence that took place on October 7th, this is exactly the kind of thing that I'm referring to. And I guess in answer to that individual's question of why more people weren't celebrating, it's because it's disgusting to celebrate the murder and kidnapping of innocent civilian people. And also, even if you think somehow that is justified, the immediate result has been 10, 20,000 Palestinian casualties in terms of Israel's response to wipe out Hamas. So it seems a very, to my mind, even if I don't think it's justified, but even if it's justified, it's a very bad strategy. Maybe you speak woke better than I do, but I think that Turtle Island is the activist who referred to Turtle Island means North America. So if the U.S. is colonizing North America and is going to get out of North, does that mean we all have to leave, or everyone who doesn't have indigenous ancestry? Obviously, it's mixed. Some people have slightly indigenous ancestry. What percentage indigenous do you have to be to not be evicted by these activist people?
I think what they mean when they say decolonize, they absolutely mean land back, land that is sovereign. There were people living here before settlers came from Europe. That's something that's, frequently denied, that this was land that was free for the taking simply because there was not a Western state established. So yeah, of course, there should be sovereign land for indigenous people to live on, to go back to. And the comparison to what's happening in Israel-Palestine, I think, is so jarring for people because a lot of people don't recognize that in their day-to-day life, that they're living on land where there were people living on before the United States was established. This wasn't just a barren landscape free to build a country on. There were many different nations on the land where the United States is. And that's hard for people to take in. It's also hard, I think, for Israel to grapple with the fact that they very much did the same thing in 1948 when they decided to push Palestinian people out of the land that they have lived on for many, many years. and establish an ethno-state, the ethno-state of Israel. And they're still pushing people out of their land today. This is an ongoing project. And so when we talk about colonization, we talk about quite literally through violence, taking land that people call their homes. If someone came to our houses in the United States today in like a white suburban neighborhood, and they decided to take it and say that it was theirs now. And when we said, hey, like, no, this is my home, this is where I live, this is my land, you can't take it, they say, that's ridiculous. You guys are savages. The way you live is despicable. It's uncivilized, and we're going to live here. And unless you will live the same way we live, you have to leave. That's reality for indigenous peoples in the United States. And so when I hear their complaints and when I hear them being inspired by Palestinians' resistance, it makes sense. When you know a life of violence, when your livelihood and your home and your ancestors have been taken by settler violence, I can understand them seeing what's happening in Palestine and feeling similar about it.
I mean, I can understand objecting to the deliberate displacing of people while it's happening. I certainly object to it. I don't want to violate people's property at all. Its property should be sacrosanct. I think there's a difference between that and pointing out that there is no way to like remedy injustices committed hundreds of years ago, which go back and forth. Like, whose land was it initially? As you note, there absolutely were tons of Native Americans living in North America, warring with each other. Like, whose land is whose is not something. I mean, we're supposed to give Texas and New Mexico and Arizona back to the state of Mexico. Like, how far does it go back? It just starts to become ridiculous. Eventually, especially when the populations then intermixed or died off, like, we have to live in reality, and we should not mistreat people, or we should not continue to violate people's rights or take their stuff. But we also can't like make up for like all of human history is these kinds of conflicts, like, you know, conflicts between neighbors and neighboring states and neighboring peoples, and like, I mean, we would all have to return to Africa in some like, to go back far enough. I don't understand. Like, it gets cut off. Well, the U.S. we act like the U.S. was the first nation, or I guess the British coming to America was like the first example of conflict between two groups of people. No, it goes back further than that, and we can't fix those things. It seems ridiculous. And I think activist people who talk about that, like we're going to give North America back to the tribes who existed in North America in the 1500s strikes people as ridiculous. In a way that, yes, in a way that treating Palestinians better and not further encroaching on their lands, for instance, in the West Bank, I don't think that sounds ridiculous. I'm with you on that.
Like, in the same way that we have, states established in the United States, there can be land given that's designated as sovereign land to be governed, not by people who have written a constitution, who are mostly white, mostly European, with an entirely different culture than the natives who are living in the United States. There are many people who are indigenous who want to go back to that. They want to have their own government. They want to have their own way of life and their own culture, be the dominant culture in the place that they live, and they don't have a place to do that right now. And so I think it's completely reasonable and entirely doable to say, okay, we have all of this federal land. How about instead of granting more drilling permits, we instead give this land back to the native people who were living on it before? It's a very attainable policy solution. We have drilling permits and swaths of federal land that is entirely unused. It's not owned by anyone. People aren't living on it. It's land that can be given back. It's actually not difficult to do. And when they talk about colonization, they really talk about controlling other people. So the United States has done this all over the world. They're talking about U.S. imperialism. The U.S. is doing this through proxy with Israel. There's a ton of land and natural gas. They have plans drawn up by the Department of Energy where they would like to establish a canal through the desert, the Negev desert, that passes directly through Gaza, as an alternative to the Suez Canal. This is plans that they drew up after the war over the Suez Canal, when we had mostly French and British stakeholders controlling the canal, and Egypt decided, you know what, this land was actually Egypt's, and this canal was dredged by Egyptian labor. This is actually ours. There's no reason Britain and France should own this. And so they decided to take it back. That was an effort of decolonization. The French and the British had no reason to control that canal. And the U.S. has said, okay, well, if you want to take it back, we're going to take this other land and displace these other people because that's a little bit more financially and militarily feasible. And the United States supporting Israel, I would not be surprised, is a part of a larger effort to establish a canal there. That's why they have established secret military bases there that we now know about through Department of Defense documents that would have gone unrecognized if it weren't for the Intercept reading them. There's so much there, so many practices that are not at all different from the colonization of the early United States that are happening today, happening right now, and have been happening for the last half of a century on a regular basis.
Well, you tell us, viewers, what do you think about decolonization? Realistic or not? We'll have more Rising right after this.